Welcome to the Nick Blevins Family Ministry Podcast. Our goal is to help you maximize your church's potential. You'll hear from top leaders in children's, student, and family ministry about the principles and practices they use. Now here's your host, Nick Blevins.
Well, hello and welcome to episode 146 of the podcast. In this episode, I get to talk with my friend, Todd Hixenbaugh, and Todd and I talk all about how he learns as a leader, as a young leader especially. I've only known Todd for a couple of years now, but certainly one of the things that stuck out right away is just his hunger to learn. And another thing that stuck out was how good he has been at networking, at connecting with other leaders. Some of that is for the podcasts that he hosts, but I think that's just natural too. He connects with people, and that's something that I believe in. We're very different. Todd's an extrovert. I'm an introvert, so I kind of have to fake being an extrovert when I'm connecting with other leaders and in settings like that. So you may not know if you saw me at, say, Orange Conference, where I am this week while this is airing. I kind of fake like an extrovert there, but that's not my natural posture, and it is for Todd. So we kind of talk about what's that look like for him, how he thinks leaders who are more like me, who are introverts, could connect with people, and why it's important to network. And then we kind of hit a practical thing at the end. We talk about social media in ministry, specifically in children's ministry. Now, Todd does this, again, for two podcasts that he hosts that we'll talk about, but he also does it for his children's ministry at his church. And so he gives some helpful pointers there for all of us that are trying to leverage social media to connect with parents. And so that's at the end of our conversation. You can get all our notes and downloads and links and resources, all that at nickblevins.com/episode 146. And before we jump into the interview, as I said, it's Orange Conference week, and so that's where I am this week. If for some reason you're listening to this, the day it comes out or something like that, and you're going to the Orange Conference, we'd love to connect with you there. Ministry Boost, our team's going to be there. We'll have a booth. We'll have a suite on Thursday, Friday. We'd love for you to come see us there. We're hosting a You Lead breakout the first day on Wednesday, and we're going to kind of unpack what we hope to offer to church leaders in a way that you could take it and do it in your own ministry. So we offer courses and coaching and consulting and all that. But the reality is a lot of this, if you can set aside the time, you can do this for yourself in your own ministry. And so we're going to teach how you can do that and be really helpful. And then at the end of the day on Thursday, at the end of that breakout day, I'm going to share in a breakout about creating a comprehensive strategy for next gen and for families in your church. What does it look like to have a complete plan as we partner with parents? And it's something that I'm really passionate about. I've talked about this on the podcast before earlier this year. I've done other breakouts similar to this, and I feel like the idea and the concept and all of this continues to evolve, and I just love getting feedback on it. And this week, I hope to learn from some other people, hear what they think about this whole idea and how it applies to their church, and maybe they'll push back on it or add to it, improve it. I look forward to that for sure. And I do look forward to this week. It's going to be a great week at the Orange Conference. If you're missing it, we hope to see you next year. If you're there, again, be sure to connect with us. But let's go ahead now and jump into my interview with Todd, where we talk all about how he's a kind of a natural networker, how he's a natural learner, as a leader, and then some practical social media tips for us as we lead our ministries. Well, today I'm talking with Todd Hixenbaugh on the podcast. Welcome, Todd.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Nick.
You bet. So before we jump in, tell us a little bit about yourself, your church, what you do there, and then also tell us about what I'll call your side hustles, some other things you do to help ministry leaders.
Yeah, so I am based out of Columbus, Ohio. Go Buckeyes. And I'm on the east side of Columbus in a little suburb called Reynoldsburg, Ohio. And I'm the elementary coordinator at a church called Reynoldsburg United Methodist Church. And so we're a church of about 1,200 people, just hanging out with small group leaders all the time and that kind of thing. So that's my day job. And then on the flip side of that, I run, like you're talking about side hustles. I have two podcasts that I run because one of them wasn't enough. So I run the Learner's Corner podcast, which I'm the co-host on that with one of my friends. And so him and I just hang out and do that. And then the other one is called the Herding Cats podcast. And that podcast I do all by myself. And we just talk about children's ministry, hang out and do that kind of stuff.
Appropriately named. Kudos on the name. It's a really good name.
No, did I ever tell you how I got the name?
I don't think you did.
Yeah, I got
the name from the scenes.
So I have a volunteer who's one of my coaches, and she's also, I think she teaches third grade. I should know that. I'm pretty sure she teaches third grade. And she had a really rough week apparently at school, one week. And then we had so she had to step into a classroom because one of her volunteers last minute just was sick and couldn't be there. And so she actually had to step into the room, and it was apparently a really bad morning. She just had there was all sorts of things going on. She had an angry parent, and she came to me Monday, the next day, and we were just meeting about it. And she goes, apparently this whole last week for me was just like herding cats. And I was like, in the moment, I needed to be like appropriate and be like, oh, I'm so sorry, and kind of coach her through that. But on the other hand, I'm in the back of my mind, I'm going, that's the perfect podcast name.
Yep, it's true. It's true. That's good, and it's very new. How many episodes we're recording?
So today I just released the 17th episode.
All right, and then Learner's Corner, how many?
Learner's Corner, we're at 141.
That is awesome. Like you are going to pass this podcast, even though this one started before yours, because you guys have for a little while. You started one a week, but then you kind of got into like 2 a week, right?
Yeah, so we go in different spurts. So my co-host, Caleb Mason, he's a crazy person. And so we'll get like a backlog. I know this is every podcaster's major problem, right, is getting too many episodes recorded, right, Nick? And
mine is the exact opposite of that as well. So. I actually had, for the first time in a long time, a backlog. And then life hit. Different things happened in the last couple of months, and that backlog went right out the.
So every once in a while, when you'll see us, we'll start releasing 2 episodes a week for like a month, and it's literally because we have like 15 episodes recorded. Because we'll do these, I call them podcast marathons, and we'll record 5 episodes in a day. And so, if you see us releasing 2 a week, that's because we had like probably 2 weeks in a row where we recorded 5 episodes.
That is good. That's how I was able to catch up. Was there was many weeks where I did 3 or 4 or 5, and it helped. I mean, especially with again, life hits you sometimes, and then so all of a sudden you don't record any for 2-3 weeks or whatever. So the Learner's Corner. It's an apt name for a podcast for you. I want to start. We're going to kind of talk about 3 things: being a learner, like a natural, like how do you learn as a ministry leader? What does that look like? You do that naturally, so I want to dig into that. How do you network? That's another thing you do really well.
Yeah.
And so we'll talk about that. And then we'll kind of shift gears and hit social media, which feels like it's out of left field, but it's something else you do well that will apply to ministry. So if we start with the learning thing, would you say you're like a natural learner, like you just have that desire innately, or is that developed? Is it like a discipline?
Well, thanks for that. So, if you're talking about whenever I was a student, no, I didn't care about math. Like I just didn't. I didn't care about science. I didn't care about any of that stuff. But what I loved to do, especially like whenever I was in middle school and high school, I would just Google things. Like I would go down these wormholes, but I would do that instead of doing homework. And like I would get in trouble. And my mom would be like, Todd, what are you doing? Like, aren't you supposed to be doing homework? And I'm like, no, Mom, but like, did you know that nuclear fission? And then I would like go on to this big tangent. She's like, who cares? Like, what are you doing? Do your schoolwork. And so no, not like necessarily in the school sense, but for me, learning has always been about being curious. And so I'm a naturally curious person. I just like to know how things work. I like to know why things work. And so for me, it becomes where, yes, there's a piece where I naturally do that because I just like to know things, but it's become a discipline for me where I actually block out time now to do just that, like just to Google stuff and research stuff. I have usually about 2 hours a week in the mornings before I really even get out of bed, where I'm on my iPad, just like learning stuff about a topic. And so, I'll plan out whatever it is I want to learn about that week, and I'll just start Googling it. I'll read some blog posts about it, whatever. But so that's kind of how learning is for me, where, hey, I just need to know more about how Twitter promotions work, or I need to learn, about classroom management and discipline stuff, because I know that my 5th grade or my 4th grade classroom with my small group, they're having a lot of problems. I have a couple resources. And so, for me, learning is something where I'm just curious, and I like to know how things work and how other people do things.
So you gave us a little bit of insight there into like what it looks like practically, because you're setting aside some time and all that. But think about the average ministry leader, maybe it's a children's ministry leader, and help them understand what are the different like avenues you learn. Cause like some people read a lot, I've got friends who are doing like that book a week thing, like Acuff will do. You and I listen to a lot of podcasts. So what are the different mediums you use, and like, give us some idea of what that looks like in a week.
So I also want to preface it with this. I am single with no children. I just want everybody to understand I am single and I have no children. So what I'm about to say some things that are going to sound a little crazy, but I just want you to know this is like what I do because I don't have children.
Brilliant. And I remember what it was like, how much I definitely read more before we had kids. Yeah. That's for sure. Now some of that's the rise of podcasts and, doing more of that and replacing in some ways. But anyway, I get that. So tell us what it is.
All right. So for me, I do two things. I'm an like an auditory learner. So I have to hear things. So I have to, I don't do so well just sitting down and reading, though I'll get to that in a second about what I do with reading to kind of hack that. But so for me, I literally, when I say I'm never not listening to something, I'm really not kidding. I'm never not listening to something. And it's always either an audiobook or a podcast. So I'm always listening to something. So I plan out my day in blocks. So I have 3 major blocks. The morning, and each block is 4 hours. And so I have the morning block, which is 7 to 11, and then I have the afternoon block, which is the 11 to 3, 11 to 4, noon to 4-ish time, and then I have the whole evening block, right? And so I actually plan out my day, what I'm going to learn based on those blocks. So I know in the morning I can listen to ministry podcasts. So like Nick, I'll listen to your podcast in the mornings because it's a podcast where people are going to be talking about, things. Maybe I need to take notes, right? Like you'll have somebody on, and I'll definitely need to take notes. And so, I'll be sitting and doing whatever, whether it's, emailing or texting with small group leaders or working with, editing next month's curriculum or whatever it is. And I'll be sitting and just listening. I'll be listening to, a conversation that's interesting. And so, your podcast is one that I listen to. Andy Stanley, Craig Rochelle, something that takes like actual thinking. That's what I'll do in the morning. I'll listen to the podcast. In the afternoon, for me, there's a book by Daniel Pink called When, which have you read that book yet?
I have not, but I have heard of it, and he's done some podcast tours. I haven't even heard a podcast yet. So like I know the premise and that's it. It's everything else.
So we interviewed, this is a plug, this is a shameless plug. We interviewed him on Daniel Pink on our podcast, and that book changed my life because it made me start thinking of when I do things. And so in the afternoon is what I call the trough period, what he calls the trough period. What I do is I'll listen to things that are entertaining. So that's when I'm going to listen to Relevant Podcast. That's when I'm going to listen to Joe Rogan's podcast. Don't at me about that. I will fight anybody about if they criticize me listening to the Joe Rogan podcast. I just
listened to the first Joe Rogan podcast I've ever listened to. Dude, I don't know if that's normal. It was 3 hours. It took me 5 days of driving probably.
Okay, I want you to understand something. The average is 3 hours. He has a couple of them that are over 5 hours.
Wow. Which it doesn't bother me. I know some people won't listen to podcasts longer than like 20 minutes, but for me, it's like it comes back home and I get in the car and you know what I mean? And, drive enough with kids and drop off that I'll get even that one I got through probably in, it's probably 3 days. I said 5 days. It's probably 3 days, maybe 4.
Yeah. I mean, I put it on 2 times speed. That's a hack, right?
Yeah. You got to get used to it, but it works. You get used to it. Your brain gets used to it. It catches up and it's fine and you're fine. I can listen to it in an afternoon. And so what I'm always doing is I'm always trying to find ways and reasons to hack different times that I have to be able to listen to something. Because you learn from entertainment podcasts, just the same as you learn from a hardcore ministry podcast or a leadership podcast, just because you're taking information, right? Like Joe might be talking about some crazy new diet, or he might be talking about some cultural phenomena that's going on, and then I Google it later and I learn about it. And so for me, podcasting is huge. I listen to podcasts just like a person would watch a TV show. So I schedule that out, and then in the evening, so this is weird.
I watch TV and listen to podcasts at the same time.
That is really weird.
It is weird. But I've developed that. I can do that. And so I will just have a podcast going that's like a 10, 15-minute long episode, and I'll just listen to it just for some further information. So podcasting for me is huge. And so I'm always trying to fit that in. And so Monday, Wednesday, and Friday is what I do. Those are my big podcast days when I'm for sure going to listen to I'm going to listen pretty much all day. I have probably 6 or 7 different shows that throughout those 3 days, I'll make sure and hit that week's episode for them. So like I normally listen to your podcast either on Tuesday morning when it comes out, or I'll listen to it for sure. If I didn't catch it on Tuesday, I'll listen to it on Wednesday morning. And so that's kind of how I scheduled it. And so I am for sure listening the majority of the day to podcasts Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. But I also, like I've talked about audio books. So I listen to most of the books. And so most of the books that I read, I have an interesting system. I'll get into that later. But for me, audiobooks has opened up this whole new thing, this whole new world of being able to learn, because you can consume them much faster than you can if you're reading it. You just can learn more from it. And I know that people a lot of times say, well, I can't concentrate, right? I can't, it feels like I don't retain as much when I listen, but you would actually be surprised. And so if I find a book, say it's, When by Daniel Pink or whatever it is, and I'll start listening to it. If I love it, then I'll actually go and buy it and I'll read it word for word at some point. So I'm always listening to something. That's the first thing. Is I'm constantly listening either to an audiobook or a podcast. And that's just my form of it's kind of entertainment for me, but it also teaches me a ton. I can't tell you how many podcasts that I have just permanently favorited in my podcast player so that I can go back and listen to them, because I go back to some of them over and over again and just to them because I think that they're really valuable. There's a 2-part episode that Craig Groeschel did in December of 2017 and January of 2018, where he talked about feedback and how to receive and how to take feedback. And it actually is a podcast that really helped me in my life. I've sent that podcast to people. I have listened to it many, many times, both of them. They're about 20 minutes long each. And so there's just something that I go to. And the reason why, and this is what I talk about a lot whenever I'm talking about learning, is whenever you're listening to something, you're able to enter into a conversation that they're having, right? It feels like you're in a conversation. Somebody's talking to you. You can just listen to what they're saying. It's a different type of learning. And so for me, I'm an auditory learner, so that really, really works for me. And then reading is something totally different, where you're reading different blog posts and things like that. And so, yeah, I'm always trying to find new blogs. I subscribe to, oh my goodness, his name, I just blanked on his name. He was Brad Lomenick. There we go. Brad Lomenick has a newsletter he comes out with once a month, and it has 2 things. He highlights all of the top young leaders to pay attention to with links to their website. And most of these people have blogs. And so I just follow their blogs and start reading their content. That's how I pull most of my content from blogs and from different articles like that, is by subscribing to his newsletter. And also Tim Ferriss has a great newsletter. He calls it 5 Bullet Friday. And those are
5 Bullet Friday. Yeah.
Yeah, those are the 2 ways that I find my blog content that I read. And so, yeah, learning for me, it's a discipline. And so here's what I tell people is you schedule things and you plan it just the same as you would plan any other personal development. Like if you're going to go to the gym, right, and you get a personal trainer, you would do the same thing. You would schedule an appointment, you would go in and you would go through the workout with a personal trainer, and you know that you're going to be there at 7 a.m. or whenever you're going to work with the personal trainer. And so I do the same thing, and I spend about 2 hours in the morning where I am reading and listening to podcasts. Usually, from 7 to 9, I'll go into Starbucks or I'll, stay at the house and sit down and I'll read and listen. And it's part of my way of waking up. And then I know that throughout the day, I'll be listening to something. And so I'm scheduling this out. I'm planning it out because intentionality is actually what wins. Intentionality is how we improve. When we just say that we're going to start learning stuff and then we just do it when we have time, Well, you're never going to get anywhere doing that. And so it's being intentional, it's planning it out. And so both audio and actually reading things, I just make sure that I have time built into my schedule to be able to do that.
That's great. Now, how would you say all of this translates to helping your ministry? Now, because I know that's not the benefit of all this. Some of it you're listening to for entertainment reasons,
right?
Right. So some of it you're just growing as a leader,
right?
But some of it you certainly listen to on a practical level to help your ministry. How does it help your ministry? And think about it. Like, I know I'm like interrupting you before you even start, but I'm thinking about the leader who might be listening to this podcast, but that's not maybe a normal thing. It's not a part of their rhythm. It's not, I mean, you're probably on the extreme end of how much you listen, but talk to the person too who listens to one here and there, but it's not like a regular part of their learning experience each week, let's say.
So I talk about this as the collective brain. I call it the collective brain. And so when I'm listening from podcasts like Andy Stanley or Craig Rochelle or your podcast or Think Orange or whatever it is I'm listening to, I'm not learning for myself. I'm on company time when I'm doing that, right? So I'm on church's time. I'm at the church, or I'm doing this and it's part of my day and I'm taking notes on it. And the reason why I do that is because I am screening things. I'm pre-screening things for my volunteers who partner with me to work with children. I'm screening things that would be helpful for them. And so, I'll send them a podcast episode that I listen to, and I'm like, hey, at minute 9, listen from minute 9 to minute 25. It's a great conversation about the lead small principles. I think it would really help you. I know that you mentioned the other day that you were really wondering about this thing, and I think that you should listen, because it really gives a great example of how to create a safe space, how to create a safe space, which is one of the lead small principles, right? And so I'll send that to a volunteer. It's the collective brain. So what I know, I want to make sure that my volunteers know and that my team knows, right? So I don't listen and I don't learn for myself. Same thing with reading. I'll read a great blog post article on emotional intelligence, or I'll read a great article on a leadership principle. Maybe it's something from John Maxwell and his team, and they'll put something out about 360-degree leadership or whatever it is. And I'll send it to my boss, or I'll send it to the executive pastor, or I'll send it to the senior pastor. Or maybe it's something that's really great about leading down, and leading side to side, right? And I'll send it to one of my coaches, and I'll say, hey, here's a great thing for you. I know that you've been saying that you've been struggling recently with one of the assistant small group leaders in the first grade classroom. Hey, here's a great article that talks about that. Here's a great article on Generation Z, right? You have a high school student who is in the classroom. So whenever I'm learning, I'm not learning just for myself. Knowledge for the sake of knowledge is actually foolishness. And so for me, it has to be able to be applied for it to be useful. Otherwise, I'm just doing a thing, right? Otherwise, I'm wasting time. And sure, I'm listening to podcasts that are for fun, but people also watch Netflix and they binge episodes on Netflix, right? And so it's a collective learning. I'm always sending people, I'm the king of sending people articles and the king of sending podcast episodes or an excerpt from a book. I've done this many times where I've sent an iTunes, like a digital iTunes gift card to a volunteer for the exact amount that a book costs. And I'll say, hey, I want you to use this and buy the book and read from this page to this page, right? And I want you to see that, because I think it's a great the book's great, but I want you to see this part of the conversation. And I want to talk about that next week whenever we get together. It's maybe 20 pages. And so we do that all the time. And it's because I'm trying to learn not just from me, but I'm trying to learn in such a way that it can impact the rest of my team and the volunteers who I'm working with.
That's awesome. And I know one of the ways you learn, which we probably didn't really talk about there, which we could talk about here, is from other people, networking, meeting with them, that whole thing. That's how we first met.
Yeah.
I don't know how long we've known each other now, 2-3 years, whatever it is. But you have met and talked to lots of people. You've been on a network with lots of leaders in the church space, in other spaces for your podcast. Even if you weren't doing the podcast, though, that seems kind of like the learning thing. It seems like a natural gift for you. So tell us what that looks like. Is it natural? Is it developed? And what does it look like? I mean, how does that work in a month? How do you network with other leaders? What have you learned from them? Tell us about that.
Yeah. I am a naturally more extroverted person. So I think that some people, whenever they meet me for the first time, they think, well, of course, I mean, it's easy for you, right? Because you're just really comfortable with people. Like, you're really comfortable talking and, so networking for you, it's easy. I could never do that. I know, Nick, that you're more of an introvert. And so some people would say, well, of course, Todd, it's easy for you. I mean, you just talk, right? And people always want to come hang out with you. And to a certain extent, that's true, but networking is the same for everybody. So here's kind of how I started with that. When I started in ministry, I was 18 years old. And Nick, when I tell you I knew nothing, not kidding, I knew nothing about anything. And I had an older gentleman, he was probably in his late 40s, but to me, I was a 19-year-old kid. And so he told me one time, he said, hey, the best thing that you can do is to find people who are further down the line than you are doing what you're doing and just ask them questions. And so I was like, oh, well, that makes sense, right? Like, I would do the same thing, if I was trying to learn anything. And so I just started, this is going to sound weird and kind of creeperish, but I started Googling top children's ministry people. Like, who's this guy named Dale Hudson, right? Like, I don't know. Who is this person? Who's Steve Adams, right? Like, I don't know. So I start reading some of their stuff, and then I just started sending them emails, Nick. And I was like, all right. So I'll send him an email, and I would get the secretary, right? And she would stonewall me, and I'd never get to talk. But hey, they would send me a copy of the book, and I would read his book, and then I would tweet at him, right? And I'd be like, hey, really appreciated the book. I love this part. And that's how I started. And then what started to grow into is I started kind of learning who the people were in children's ministry, right? Like, I knew that Bethlehem, Church of the Highlands, is really great whenever it came to training and doing stuff with volunteers. I just kind of knew that. And that was because I had read enough of her stuff, and I had followed her, and I had talked to people who knew her, and those types of things. I knew that Dale Hudson was just the person to go to whenever it came to multi-site children's ministry. He was an unbelievable person at understanding how to do that at a multi-site level. So anyways, I just started learning these people by Googling them, finding out who they were. And then the shift happened when I was around 20 or 21. I got super intentional about it. And I started reaching out, and I would just, Nick, when I tell you I did some creepy stuff to get people's emails, I am not. I did some weird stuff to get people's emails. And I started Googling people, and I would start emailing them. And then instead of just saying, hey, my name's Todd, I would ask them specific questions. Like, hey, I saw your blog. You wrote this about small group leaders. What did you like? Can you clarify that a little bit more? I think that I've run into this problem before, and I would love to hear your perspective on, whatever it was. And Nick, people are more willing than you would think to talk to you. Like, you can get people who you would never imagine to talk to you if you just ask. And when I became really specific, and when I asked good questions, I think that's a skill to learn, is asking good questions. When I started to do that, I found that people really opened up, and people were willing to talk. And I started talking and having conversations with people I had no business talking to. And people were just so willing to share. And that's how it started. And then I went from there to starting these podcasts where I just applied the same skill over and over and over again. And I just stopped being afraid of getting a no. And somebody just recently asked me, hey, like, how do you do that? Like, that seems really cool. How do you get so many people to say yes, or so many people to respond to you? And I started thinking about it, and what I realized, because I had always, for a long time, I had just thought that it was, I'm a natural extrovert. I'm good at talking. People kind of, my mom says I'm a used car salesman, is what she says. She goes, you could talk a. Did
you say that's mom? Is that a compliment? I'm not really sure.
My mom always says that I could get the pump at a gas station. I could get the gas station attendant to pay at the pump. I don't know exactly what that means, but she says that to me all the time. But what I realized was it had nothing to do with my personality, and it had everything to do with the system, right? It had everything to do with the system. And so I started thinking about it, and what I realized was anybody actually could do it. And so what it takes is the willingness to be told no. Like, you have to understand that sometimes you're not even going to be told no. Like, your email just isn't going to get answered, right? Like, they're just not going to respond back. But if that's the worst thing that can happen, then that's not so bad, right? I had a guy one time who told me, he said, "Hey, do you want to know the reason why most people never get the front parking spot at Walmart?" And I said, "No, why?" And he said, "Because people stop about 8 rows back and just take what's available." He said, "So I always try to drive all the way up to the front of the parking lot to see if there's a spot available." And he said, I most of the time I don't get anything, but sometimes I do. And it's kind of great. You just get out of your car and walk right in and come back out. And you don't have to walk in the rain. You don't have to walk very far. And I kind of took it and applied it to this, right? And so I ask people, I ask very specific questions, and it works. And people are really willing, especially if you say, "Hey, I'm going to be in Charlotte next month. I would love to meet up with you. Here are the times when I'm available. I'd love to buy you a burrito." Dude, you start offering people burritos and my gosh, like, you would be shocked. Like, I've had some crazy conversations with strangers because I offered to buy them a burrito. Have I ever offered to buy you a burrito? I should buy you a burrito now.
I don't know, but I would say yes, because that would be an easy yes for me. Because almost any kind of food would be a yes. I have been wondering, as you've been talking about this, is there a name of someone that you've been able to connect with that you could share with us that you never thought you may have been able to connect with before? So you think about
well, besides you, Nick. I mean, that was
somebody important. Somebody important. Now I'm trying to,
Yeah, so there are a couple of people. There are a couple people who we've gotten to who have
break some confidences here and get. No, I'm just kidding.
who have actually become mentors and friends. One of the people that comes to mind is Brad Lomenick. So Brad and I, we talk about once a month. So if you don't know who Brad is the former president of Catalyst Conference. So like the big leadership conference that happens once a year in Atlanta. It's a Christian leadership conference. It was started by John Maxwell, Andy Stanley. Well, Brad ran it for over 10 years. And Brad's relationship was weird because I emailed him out of the blue. It was May of 2017. And Nick, we didn't record an episode with Brad until, what was that? Like October? No.
Late last year, right?
January of 2018.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, it was been a little while because you talked about his book, H3 Leadership. Is that right?
Yeah. We talked about his book and it was a long time. Well, then and it was just him and I emailing like once a month, like, "Hey, you just checking in." And he'd be like, "Hey, I have you on my schedule. I know things are just going on." And so we just formed a relationship. And now like Brad and I, we talk on a regular basis. That was one of those ones where it was persistence. And it was, when I said I was going to email you on the 1st of the month, I meant it. I'm going to email you on the 1st of the month. And now Brad and I, we talk on a regular basis. Another one is Jeff Henderson, Jeff is a great guy, and Jeff there was no tangible reason why Jeff needed to talk to me. Jeff Henderson is the lead pastor at Gwinnett Church in Atlanta, which is part of the North Point Ministries network of churches down there. And so Jeff and I, we talk on a semi-regular basis through email and through, just through different interactions on social media, whatever. And he's somebody who I've learned a tremendous amount from. And all of that was just through email and through asking really good questions and through persistence. And so those are two ministry people. I have a ton of people who are not ministry. This is a ministry podcast, so we'll stick to the ministry people. But I have a bunch of people who I talk to on a regular basis.
I just wanted to hear a couple names because it'll help people realize, you know what? That's true. You may be listening. You thought never would have been able to have a conversation with Jeff Henderson to do that. And
people, like I said, Nick, people are really willing to reach out and talk to you if you ask good questions and if you're willing to be persistent. So
that's awesome.
Definitely.
Now, in talking about, before we move on to social media, the last thing with networking, practically, and you kind of hit some of this, but for the person who is an introvert who would like to learn from somebody, is it usually just an email? Is it a tweet? Is it one? Is it, do you get a little, what's the word? I don't want to say obnoxious, creepy.
Do you get creepy?
Persistent was the word I was looking for. Give them 4 attempts. I mean, before you say no, like, how does that work?
So by the way, for introverts, email should be like your best friend, right? Like you can answer it whenever you feel like it. So it isn't like a phone call, right, where you have a planned thing and you have to answer at a specific time, right? So email should be like your best friend. You can open it when you want. You can answer it when you want, all of that. So this is what I do. I'll just kind of walk you quickly through the process for whenever I'm wanting to email somebody or talk to somebody who I don't know. And remember, these are people who you do not know. You don't know these people. And so my first step is this is what I type into Google search. All right. This sounds so dumb, but it's true. I've done this with Jeff Bezos and all sorts of famous people, like really famous entrepreneurs. This is what you do. You type in Jeff Henderson email, and the internet searches to see what Jeff Henderson's email is.
I'm totally doing this right now.
Do it. I'm serious. You could do this with Mark Zuckerberg. You could do this with everybody, and it's their actual public email. And so that's where I start. And their email is either going to pop up or it's not. And if it pops up, you send them an email, and the email should go something like this. Hey, Jeff, my name is Todd Hixenbaugh, and I'm part of XYZ, right? Either for me, it was the church and the podcast or whatever it was. And hey, I've listened to you for a while on the Launch University podcast. Really have loved it and learned a lot of stuff. I had a very specific question for you about an episode last week, and blah, blah, blah. Here's the question. I would love to hear your perspective on this because I ran into this the other day at work. Love to hear back from you. Thanks for all that you do, Todd Hixenbaugh. Right now, I'm going to move off of the Jeff Henderson thing because I'm going to say something controversial. Most people, when somebody takes specific interest in their work, it's a pride thing, right? Like we like that. It's really cool when somebody notices that we did something and we like that. It gives us some juice, right? And so when you word it like that, you really appreciated what they did. You loved the fact that they asked this question, and you have a specific question pertaining to what they talked about. For a lot of people, they like that, and you have a high tendency of them getting back to you. Now, you have to understand that it's probably going to be an assistant that gets back to you the first time, and they're going to say, hey, Jeff appreciated your email, or Brad appreciated your email. He's really busy right now, but he wanted me to do blah, blah, blah. Right. And so here's a copy of the book, or here's this, or, I've had this happen. This happened with Brad. Brad responded back to me. Right. And he said, hey, thanks for reading the book. Love that you enjoyed it. Here's an idea for that question that you had. That's if everything goes right. That's if everything goes right. And that's easy, right? You can answer that email on your own time. You can send it on your own time. Everything is in your control. So if you're a person who's not naturally great with talking, email should be your best friend because you can really plan your email out. And so that's what I do all the time is I sit down, I Google somebody's email and all that. That's if everything's perfect and if people have not tried to hide their contact information from the internet. If they have tried to do that, you got to get a little creepy. And I'm not kidding. So sometimes you have to search a little harder. You look to see if there's somebody else, maybe their assistant, you got a hold of their assistant. And you just kind of match up how their email is or whatever. And you just email people, So if their assistant is snow@whatever.com, well, type in their first initial and their last name at whatever the rest of that tag is and try that. So you find ways to figure it out. But for me, if I'm an introvert or if I'm somebody who's not naturally good at this, there's a lot of ways you can shield yourself initially from having on the phone conversations that might be nerve wracking, where you can think about your response and you can do that. You could also do this with DMs, right? Particularly with people who are the millennial generation. They are really responsive to DMs on Instagram and on Twitter. And that's really easy to do. You just go in, you can, and on Instagram, you can actually DM anybody. So like you could DM Jennifer Lopez, like right now on Instagram. Now she might not respond to you, which is probably very likely, but you can do it. And so like you can DM anybody that you want. And I've gotten people for both podcasts that way as well. And so that's another one where it's totally on your own time, right? You don't have to talk on the phone. And so there are lots of entryways to starting conversations with people who you have no business talking to that don't require a whole lot. I think, Nick, I just emailed you.
Well, my email would be easy to find because you already have it. Plus, actually, mine's not that hidden. I don't have to worry about that. I don't need gatekeepers. I don't have assistants. But I'm impressed at your level of stalker ability right here, and probably a little bit concerned. I was just thinking about that.
Nick, you don't tell anybody about that. But I have skills.
I won't. It's a secret.
It's you and I and all of our closest friends listening.
Yeah, nobody else is listening. So that's awesome. Well, I mean, obviously, I would agree that that's part of, like, when I think about.
Do you find that to be true too, though? I mean, I don't know. Do you find
Oh yeah, absolutely. That part's certainly true. And I would say, like, I've never probably taken it to the level that you've taken. I don't have that kind of persistence, probably. But like, the only reason I know Carrie Newhoff to this day is because we met via Twitter at a conference in like 2007 or 8 or something like that. And then we had him come speak to our parents one year to church, and it's not like we're friends, like these
You're
great
not
friends,
besties.
but no, but he like, that's the only reason I even know him, is because of that initial connection. And that was through Twitter. And that actually was somebody else that I knew that worked for North Point, still does work for North Point. And I only knew him through social media, which is kind of funny. And then I think we connected at a Drive conference or something, the three of us, which is really cool. So now there is like Carrie, I'm sure, gets a million types of requests now. And so there's no way he's going to keep up with all that stuff. I do not reach out to Carrie very often because I know his time is valuable and it's limited, and I don't want to do that. But I think people are, there's always exceptions. There's always the person that's a jerk. I don't know how else to say it. But most people,
I've run into that.
And there are people who would absolutely respond to every request. They just can't, and I would imagine Carrie's in that camp. I don't really know, but he just can't, he can't keep up with all the comments and emails and social media stuff or whatever, but he would love to, you know what I mean? So the heart's still there. And for some people, he probably still does. And so I just think, but it's kind of like what you're not saying, but it's true, is you're never going to network with anybody if you don't ask. You
have to ask.
And as an introvert, I have found social media helped me do this.
Yes.
Because I'm not the person. I've been in the rooms a couple times before at a conference or at a smaller gathering with somebody I would love to talk to who's a leader that's well known. But I'm not the kind of person that just walks up. Like, that's not me. I've never been that. Even at when I was a kid at sports, I'm not the one trying to get autographs or whatever. Now, to have a real conversation, I would love to. But to like jump just in and meet you in person or do that, I'm probably not going to do that. But social media, where it's a little bit, I'm not putting them on the spot and they can respond or not, and it's easy for them to do that. That's easy. That's safe. Email, same kind of thing. So if you're an introvert like I am, that's an easy way to go.
I've got another little hack, and this is for ministry leaders listening. One of the things that I know is difficult is this. For many of you, if you're wanting to put on like a special parent night or something like that, and there's a person like a person coming to mind is Carlos Whitaker, right? And Carlos does great at parent events and stuff like that. Carlos wrote a book 2 years ago called Kill the Spider. And he does a great job with parent events. But the problem is that Carlos's life is crazy and he's really busy. Or Carrie's another great example of that. What I found is that in their off season, when they're not promoting a book or something like that, it's almost impossible to get to them because they're working on their next thing, or they're working on content, or they're already speaking at Catalyst Conference and Orange Conference, and they're speaking at all these different things. It's really hard to get to them. What I have found, though, is that whenever they're coming out with a new book or a new online course or something that they're needing to promote, they're much more open to coming and speaking at your event or coming on your podcast. And so the whole reason that we even got Carrie Newhoff to come on the Learner's Corner is because of his book, Didn't See It Coming, that came out this fall of 2018. So for people listening who are ministry leaders, if you're looking to have somebody come and speak at your event, one of the best times to do that is in the leading up to a book release or an online course release. So, for example, if you know that there's a pastor who's coming out with a book in September, if you ask and book them in July or in August to come speak at your event, they're much more likely to say yes. They're much more because they're trying to get groundswell.
Especially if it's the same content too.
Yes.
I mean, like they do it either way,
yes.
But I mean, it's a double yes. If it's like, come talk about that here.
Yes.
That just seems like
because they're also working with publishers, right? And that's another thing too, is going through publishing houses. I don't know if you do this, Nick, but going through publishing houses is a great way of getting people to come on the show. And it's also a great way to get speakers to come to your ministry events. So if they're coming out with a book, go through their publisher, go through their publishing house, because the publishing house is to a certain extent controlling their schedule. So that's a good one that I haven't done enough of. I have been directed to publishing houses once, twice, maybe something like that. If I'm thinking through guests I've had on podcasts, but I've never, and that is a good thing that I should probably do more of, but I haven't gone there first myself. I almost exclusively do that right now for the Learner's Corner podcast. I almost exclusively go through publishing houses because, again, they're trying to promote a product, right? And so the person who wrote the book, I hate to say this, but they're almost the commodity. And so they're trying to sell that person so they can sell books. And so, they're going to have them speaking everywhere. Mm-hmm. And so, if you're looking for a speaking engagement and your person is going to come out with a book in September, go on Amazon, scroll all the way to the bottom of the book page for the pre-order stuff and look and find out what the publishing house is. And then go online to the publishing house's website and email them on the info page or whatever it is, info@penguinhouse.org or .com or whatever it is, and ask, and they will direct you to the book agent. I'm dead serious. This happens all the time. I'll tell you off air when we're off air. I'll have to tell you something that just happened recently that was ridiculously crazy, but it all happened through going through a publisher.
I'm working on one right now that I'm realizing maybe I should go through the publisher too. It's already in process, but it's not a yes.
It's so much easier.
That's all I need is some extra leverage, to come from the publisher. Maybe I have to try that. Yep. So, all right, let's shift gears to wrap up here and talk social media.
Yep, let's do it.
Now, obviously you do especially your generation, it's like you're just digital natives. So you know this well, but you do this with a podcast. You've grown audiences from scratch for both of those two things. But then you also do this at church. And so for the average church leader listening, I'd love for you to talk about what does social media look like at your church? How have you grown that audience? How do you use it practically? Yeah. What goes on there? How often? Tell us that. What does it look like, for your children's ministry? So
for children's ministry, you have 3 platforms that you need to fill: Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest. Those are 3 platforms that you have to fill. So most people, for most children's ministries, social media is the bulletin board, right? That's where you post things of, hey, this event's coming up, and hey, we're looking for small group leaders. And that's about the extent. Maybe you'll post pictures from your Easter egg hunt, which, we're recording this during Holy Week, and so that's kind of on my mind. But you're going to post your Easter pictures there, but you don't do anything else with it. And on Instagram, you'll do the same thing. You might do a cute story, right, of you, and you'll do the boomerang thing, Nick, on the Instagram stories, right? Mm-hmm. And you'll do that, and you'll show your eggs, you'll show the Easter eggs, whatever, and you'll shake your phone a little bit, and it'll make it do this cool thing, and it's ooh, you're so social media savvy, right? Well, when you do that, you're basically wasting your time. Essentially, you're wasting your time. When we use social media in children's ministry, like a bulletin board, we're missing the entire purpose of social media, particularly those specific platforms. And so there's a couple of quick and easy things, because I know we got to get out of here, but there's a couple quick and easy things that I'll share for how you can begin to use social media effectively with the different platforms. And again, like I said, you should be using in children's ministry 3 specific platforms: Instagram, Pinterest, and Facebook. So I'll start with Facebook really quick. Here's a couple of really quick tips. If you don't have a private page, like a private Facebook group set up for your volunteers, you're failing at life. You should have a private Facebook group set up just for your volunteers who are small group leaders. It doesn't matter what they do in your children's ministry, but it's a great way of building a community that's online for your volunteers to be able to see. We've had great interaction with people who, hey, my kid's sick. Would anybody be willing to fill in for me today? I'm a first grade assistant leader, and I can't make it today. Is anybody? And they'll literally fill it themselves. They'll fill the gaps themselves. Other one is, prayer requests. I don't know how many times we've caught different things actually going on with a volunteer because they went online and posted in the Facebook group. And so I have a Facebook group for volunteers specifically, and it's a private group. Nobody else can see it. It's just for the children's ministry volunteers. So that's the first thing. You need to have a private group for your volunteers on Facebook. Second is you need to have a private group for your parents. And it can be, you could go either way with this. You could do a private group or you could do a public group, but make it specific for the parents there. And here's the reason why. In a digital age today, when right now the average parent that has a child in elementary ministry is about 32 to 33 years old. That means they're a millennial. And for them, they were in high school when Facebook came out. For them, the water that they swim in is pictures. You need to have a spot to share all of those pictures that we were talking about. You need to do that. So you need to have a group for your volunteers. You need to have a group for parents. And then on your Facebook wall, on your church, on just your children's ministry Facebook page wall, that should literally just be an archive of articles. You should be posting every day an article or something that's helpful for parents. Parents, their lives, Nick, you know this because you are a parent. Your life is so consumed with let's just get through the day. Let's take care of the needs that we have to take care of for today. They don't have time to go and search through stuff. And so what you need to do is turn your Facebook page wall into a curated archive of all sorts of really high level articles and videos that your parents can click on, read, and watch. And your Facebook page should be the go-to spot. It should be the go-to spot for your families to go to and find out about what the latest thing with childhood vaccinations. It should be the place to go when you're talking about discipline and how to appropriately do discipline. It should be the spot where people are going to learn more about discipling in the home and teaching your kids how to pray. It should be the go-to spot. They should want to go to your Facebook page. By the way, when they want to go to your Facebook page, it isn't bad to use the Facebook story feature now that they have. And you go on there and people are now, Facebook stories is actually in third place right now behind Snapchat and Instagram stories in terms of the short-term sharing mode of all social media spaces. It's not a bad thing then to then go and you can use your Facebook stories space to be able to post about your upcoming event. But your Facebook page should be a curated space of archived things that people can go to regularly. Does that make sense?
That's interesting. I don't think a lot of people have thought about it that way. They're mostly thinking about, the easy thing is just to push things that you want to push, but the better version is to not just push, but share resources, conversations, but you're even expanding resources out to other things, other areas, which is interesting.
So Nick, it just makes sense because here's the deal. If I want to know about an event that's going to happen at the church, and if I really want to know that, what am I going to do? I'm going to Google it, aren't I? Am I going to Google it? If I'm a stranger who doesn't know, now statistics are showing that people are more and more going to Facebook, and that's fine. You can curate your events. There's a spot in Facebook where you can do that as well so people can see your events. But far and away, people are going to Google your church, and they're going to have it there. So what you should be doing is having your Facebook page or your website updated regularly to include all of your event times and places to register your kids. And so, your Facebook page is a great place to curate things, resources for parents. It's one of the best places to do that for because Facebook is set up that way. It just is.
Yeah, it totally is. Now, what tools do you use to actually schedule this? And what does it look like for your ministry? Do you do one day a week, an hour or two, and you're done?
So used to be that I would use Buffer. But I don't use Buffer anymore. And the reason why is because Facebook has now got their junk together, and you can actually now schedule posts right through Facebook. So when you set up the Facebook page, if you set it up as a business page or a nonprofit page, you have the ability to schedule posts out. Like on a personal page, you can't schedule a post in advance. But on a business page or on a nonprofit page, like what you would set up for the church, you can. And so you can actually set up your posts in advance. I do them for the podcasts. I'm actually not in charge. I've helped develop the Facebook strategy for our children's ministry page, but I don't personally do the posting anymore. Our communications team does all of that now. We just send them the articles that we want them to post. But what you can do is, so Facebook recommends that you post at least once a day, no more than 2 times though. And there's a couple of times that are great to do that. One of them is at 8 o'clock in the morning, which is right when people are sitting down to drink their cup of coffee before they do their commute in to work. The other time is at 7:30 at night, which is when people have eaten dinner, they've cleaned everything up, and they're sitting down to watch television. So what we do is what we'll do is we'll schedule them for one of those 2 times. That way in the morning people can see it, and then in the evening for all of our West Coast people who might have moved, or we have a lot of people who travel a lot, and so they're traveling on the West Coast or whatever. If we post something at 7 or 7:30, that parent is still going to see it. They're just going to see it, 3 hours. It's going to be 4:30 where they're at. And so we do some strategic stuff like that, just to think about that so that we can post things. And so we usually do 1 post, sometimes 2, but most of the time it's 1 post a day. And it just keeps stuff relevant and that sort of thing. And stories is always a great thing to do, just to keep people updated on events, or just some fun stuff, taking a picture of something crazy that happened at the church or whatever. So that's how we use Facebook. Real quick.
Do you share the church resources for parents to use at home too? Is that part of what you post?
Yep. Most that we post is resources for parents.
They're good reminders. I mean, I like that. I mean, I'm a parent and we do that too. And it's just helpful as a reminder, if you have
pretty much everything that we do. Yeah. Pretty much everything we do with Facebook is designed for resources for parents. Yeah. Instagram's really easy, Nick. Instagram is your entertainment page. So Instagram is where most of the people that are going to be following your Instagram page as a church are the millennial parents, right? And that's where you have fun. That's where you take the crazy video of the large group leader, right? Exploding something in large group. You put that on your stories. That's where you might post. You might have your creative team come up with some templates for some Bible verse stuff. You can post that there. But I use it a lot for video. So we do a lot of video through our account, where, hey, it's me, putting stuff together, prepping stuff, for Sunday morning with volunteers, or, maybe I'll just take a picture of a volunteer who just has done a great job, and I'll put that on the story. I do that a lot on Sundays. Usually I post those in the afternoon, but it's a way that it's a tool to showcase your ministry. It's just a tool to showcase the ministry. So what I like to think of it as, hey, is your Instagram page should be it is an archive of, so that people, if you want to know what our ministry is called, Pathway Kids, if you want to know what Pathway Kids ministry is all about, go to our Instagram page, because there's going to be video that you can put on there. There's pictures. You can get a pretty good feel for what we're all about. There's a picture of the welcome center. There's a picture of what the classrooms look like. There's a picture of just the hallway, right? There's video of us doing stuff in large group. There's video of small group. I mean, that's a place to go that you can get a feel for what this ministry looks like. And that's really how we try to use Instagram.
You know who Dave Adamson is, right? Social media guy for North Point. Yeah. He was one of the people they had speak at Next, even I was there for. And we don't usually, social media is not usually one of the topics that is covered, because you're talking to a room full of next gen pastors. Not like a lot of them are doing that. But it was great. He was there. And it was interesting. You would not be surprised at this, being connected in this world. But he said, if I told churches, if you told me you could only do 2 things, I'd say do Instagram and Facebook. Is what he said, which is interesting, because we all know Instagram and YouTube. Is that what I said? We all know Facebook has the largest platform, but he said Instagram, is 5 times more engagement per post than Facebook. And YouTube is, the second largest website, second largest search engine, all that stuff. And he gave an idea about how you could take clip from a message and in a few hours of work, split it down and actually put it across 6 platforms. So then, you're talking Facebook, stories and Twitter and whatever. And how you can basically do that one process, but then you end up with, I think it was 6 pieces of content in about 2 hours. Yeah. And it was really smart, but it is hard. I know in our context, it's like, man, everybody's on Facebook right now. It's hard to ignore it, but Instagram can't be ignored either. It's kind of like a both end if you can manage it.
So I use Facebook to curate things for parents to learn from. I use Instagram to showcase the ministry. And then I use Pinterest, Nick, and Pinterest is interesting. Like, what mom do you know that isn't on Pinterest, right? Like, they're all using Pinterest. And so what I use
what's
Pinterest.
Interesting is I didn't think about that. I thought you were going to say YouTube or something else when you were going for the 3. I was like, nope. Surprises Pinterest. So tell us how you do it.
So with Pinterest is a great platform to use to give examples of ideas for parents hands-on to do with their kids. So like during the winter, I would do posts where I would pin different ideas for like snow day activities. So you and I, we live on the East Coast. I live in the Midwest. You live on the East Coast. It snows here. And so I would do pins where, you could see, so here are some activities to do for snow days. Right. So, hey, moms, here are 30 ideas for snow day activities that you can do. Hey, here is an interesting thing. Here's a craft idea that you can do for Holy Week. Right. That's something that you can do. Is here's something to do with your kids. Here's a craft idea. I literally, Nick, use Pinterest just like an idea board for parents. Like, we talk about resourcing and partnering with parents. Listen, it is literally the best place. It's even better than Facebook, what I was saying earlier, to put practical, real life, step-by-step ideas in front of parents. And then you just advertise it at the church and say, hey, if you go on our Pinterest, you can check out all these new ideas. Hey, I know that we've been doing this parenting series. Here's how you get next level, and here's how you get buy-in, by the way, from your senior leadership. You go in and you say, hey, we're going to create, we're doing this parenting series, right? And you've been preaching the last 4 weeks about this parenting series. We're going to create some pins and put on our Pinterest of some practical steps of how we can mobilize each one of your weeks that you talked about. You want to talk about getting buy-in from a pastor and have them talk about stuff from the front. You tell them that you're going to create pins with some of their bottom lines and some action steps. Dude, they're like all about that. And so I've done that stuff before and put that all on Pinterest. It's a great way to get super practical and share resources with parents. Super practical.
That's cool. Yeah, that's definitely not one that we've ever used. Hadn't thought about that for sure. I mean, totally get it. I mean, you're right. It makes sense, which is interesting. We did that actually. I shouldn't say we never did it. Last year, the Orange curriculum, which we used, had, it was with the summer theme and the theme that was for the curriculum. Plus, we had this idea that we never fully developed, which was to create a resource for parents of 10 family ideas to use this summer, to spend time as a family. And we never created that as a separate resource. What we ended up doing was just kind of wrapping it into the summer series and putting some information on the page. But we did create a Pinterest page for that, which was great because it was easy to pull in other ideas and pin them. I say this, as I know how that works, and I really don't. But I understand how it works, I guess you should say. And we made a board for that, and we just kept updating it throughout the summer. Now, it's hard to measure how much it was actually used, but in terms of it being easy and practical, I mean, it was all of those things. So as a parent, it would have been easy
I'll tell you,
to pull that off there.
I'll tell you, Nick, how you can see how it's used is you just start asking moms. Like, you just start asking moms, and they'll be like, "Yeah, we go to your Pinterest board. Like, it's really useful." And by the way, I agree with Dave Adamson with YouTube. Like, I totally agree with him. We just haven't delved as much into the YouTube thing, just because I do all these other things. So adding YouTube on top of it is a bit much.
Yeah, and that's why we haven't done anything either. I mean, I got a friend who started rolling like pre-roll ads on YouTube within a 3 mile radius of the middle school, and it's a quick 10-second invite from the middle school pastor to their middle school environment. I thought, man, that's genius. That's awesome.
That is.
But like we haven't done any of that stuff yet. So
totally
cool.
with you.
Well, I wanted to hear what you do because I know you're good at that. I know people are asking all the time, how does that work? What do you do practically?
Mm-hmm.
You know, what's on your page? What's a win? You know, we could talk forever just about that, but
right.
We've gone a long time here and hit three good topics. How can people connect with you if they have any questions? Again, how can they check out the Learner's Corner, Herding Cats? Even obviously search for it in your podcast app. But how else can they connect with you?
So besides, like what you said, just besides look up the podcasts, either the Learner's Corner or Herding Cat podcast, do that on iTunes. You can go to herdingcatspodcast.com. That's probably the best way to get in touch with me, to email me. You can also just Google Todd Hixenbaugh email. Remember, I taught you got that. You can Google that and it pops right up. My email address, which is just so I'll say it out loud so that you don't have to do that. It's todd@herdingcatspodcast.com. You could do that. The other thing that you can do is just find me on social media. My personal social media is I'm on Twitter @Todd Duke. So it's capital TODD, then capital DUKE. And then on Instagram @Hixenbaugh Todd. And then the Herding Cat stuff is all Twitter is @HerdingCatsPod. On Instagram it's @HerdingCatsPodcast. So that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. Appreciate it. I know you do podcasts all the time, so appreciate you carving out time to come on somebody else's. Thanks, Todd.
Yep. Thank you.
Well, that was fun to record with Todd, and I actually was on his podcast, Herding Cats, that just kind of launched here recently. If you want to check that out, and some action items I think of coming out of this interview fit kind of the three areas, right? I think number one, as you think about being a learner, which I think is so important as a leader. What's one way that you can pick that you're going to learn consistently every week? Is it podcast? Is it blogs? Is it a book? I have actually avoided, even though I know I would like it, using like Audible and listening to books. And the only reason I've avoided it is because I listen to so many podcasts that I just feel like I don't have a lot of time. But I have been really wanting to read a book. I'm sure many of you have read. That's Dare to Lead by Brene Brown. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to get the audiobook. I'm going to try this out. And I know, many leaders, friends of mine, who part of their personal development is they have a subscription to Audible and they read a book or listen to a book a month, which is huge. So what's the one thing you can add to your weekly rhythm to learn? And then an action step related to networking. What is one way you can reach out to someone to network with them? I think, again, with the idea of learning from them. How can you learn from them? Maybe we're just going to ask them what ministry looks like at their church and just poke around and ask questions and why do they do this and how do they do that and learn from that. I think that would be really helpful. And then third, what is one tip you can take from what Todd talked about with social media and apply that to your ministry? Maybe there's just one change. Maybe it's a big change, but maybe it's a small tweak just based on something he said. But how can you tweak, change, improve? Obviously, we don't want to tinker just to tinker, but how can you improve how you're using social media this week, this month in your ministry? Again, you can get the show notes at nickblevins.com/episode 146. I hope if you're at the Orange Conference, I hope we get to connect. If not, hope to see you maybe at Orange Tour or at Orange Conference next year or something like that for sure. Or maybe at one of the other events that we hope to be at with Ministry Boost. I definitely look forward to meeting you all there. Thanks for listening. Thanks for sharing this, leaving a rating and a review. That always helps, and I really appreciate that. And more than anything, I hope it's helpful. I hope this is helpful. So thanks for listening. Hope you have a great week, and I'll catch you next time on the Family Ministry Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Nick Blevins Family Ministry Podcast. We hope this helps you maximize your church's potential. We would love to hear stories of how you apply what you've learned. You can do that by leaving a comment on iTunes or in the show notes at nickblevins.com.